Today we will be interpreting Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. The author of this book is Yuval Noah Harari, an Israeli historian. In this book, he suggests that the deepest and most fundamental force behind the brilliant civilization created by humans from ancient times to today lies in the cognitive revolution driven by imagination. I will first briefly introduce the theme of Sapiens and the author. As the name suggests, this book is a history centered on the human species. At first glance, it may not seem special. It's just human history, right? However, if you think carefully, you'll find that the way this history is written is quite interesting. Why do I say this? Because when you look at other books written on the history of mankind, they are usually either biological history or human history. Simply put, one tells you what humans are, and the other tells you what humans have done. For example, the famous The Naked Ape says that humans are hairless apes, and their sexual, parenting, and combat behaviors can all be explained by biological theories. On the other hand, the famous A Global History explains how humans created the magnificent civilizations of Greece and Rome, India, China, Western Europe, and Islam. However, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, is a civilization history that revolves around humans as a species. Simply put, it will tell you what humans have done with a focus on what kind of species they are. At first, you might think that this perspective is very materialistic. All the civilizations created by humans can ultimately be attributed to the kind of species humans are. What kind of species are humans? They are just primates, right? As The Naked Ape says, hairless apes. But this book is not like that. It will tell you that the most prominent and magical feature of humans as a species is that they have evolved a whole set of mechanisms that enable a great power to be realized in biological terms. This great power is imagination. The reason humans have achieved all these accomplishments and created great civilizations is that we have imagination. Now that you understand the theme of this book, let me introduce you to the author. The author of this book is Yuval Noah Harari, an Israeli historian born in 1976. He is only 42 years old this year and can be considered young and vigorous. He obtained a Ph.D. in history from the University of Oxford and is now a professor in the Department of History at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. The academic community has a unanimous evaluation of him, a young genius, and the main reason he received this evaluation is his two books, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, as well as a series of extraordinary views put forward around these two books. For example, in Sapiens, Harari believes that compared to other advanced animals like chimpanzees, humans do not have many advantages as individuals. The main reason humans have achieved such great accomplishments is their ability to collaborate in groups. The reason why humans are good at group collaboration is that they have imagination. Other animals only live in objective reality, but humans can live in both objective and virtual realities, and this is the real reason humans can rule the earth. The ideas in Sapiens have already shocked many historians, but Harari has not stopped there. In Homo Deus, he further proposes more subversive views. For example, our species is beginning to face choices such as whether we should become gods, make ourselves immortal, or if artificial intelligence robots eventually surpass humans, hand over the power to manage life and society to robots and just pursue happiness. Unlike many historians who focus on the past, Harari focuses on the present. He believes that humans have entered a stage where they must answer these questions, and his job is to draw knowledge, wisdom, experience, and lessons from history to answer these questions. I believe you now have a preliminary understanding of this young genius. Now let me introduce you to the basic format and structure of Sapiens. Looking at the table of contents of Sapiens, you'll see that it is divided into 4 parts with a total of 20 chapters. The first part explains the cognitive revolution, the second part explains the agricultural revolution, the third part explains human unification, and the fourth part explains the scientific revolution. From this table of contents, you can see that the most important clue in Harari's observation of human history is revolution, and revolution in the broadest sense. It means the most fundamental changes and updates in all aspects, from cognition to technological production to social organization. This is very important, and I will emphasize it again. The most important clue in Harari's observation of human history, or the most important driving force behind historical changes and development, is revolution. If you remember this clue, you will be able to better understand the purpose and significance of Sapiens. Now, I will follow the content of the book to help you understand Harari's fundamental view. Why humans constantly innovate themselves and why the unique imagination of the human species is the driving force behind the continuous advancement of history. Part 1. Cognitive Revolution. First, Harari wants to tell you that this species called humans is actually not that special. In terms of physics and chemistry, they are just a combination of atoms and molecules. In terms of biological classification, they are just a species of primates called hominids. In fact, animals like chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans are very close to us in a biological sense. As the book says, 6 million years ago, a female ape gave birth to 2 children, one of whom became the ancestor of all chimpanzees and the other became the ancestor of all humans. Moreover, even within the hominid species, the species to which we humans belong today does not differ biologically from other ancient human species in history. You may remember from middle school biology that species are classified into phyla, classes, orders, families, genera, and species. Today's humans belong to the Homo genus and the Sapiens species, and are the only remaining species in this genus. However, in history, there have been other Homo species, such as the Neanderthals in the Middle East and Europe and the Denisovans in Oceania. But archaeological and genetic research has proven that these other species, besides sapiens, interbred with our ancestors to a small extent, leaving a bit of their genes in some of today's ethnic groups. However, most of the ancient humans were eliminated by our ancestors 70,000 to 30,000 years ago, or at least their living spaces were squeezed to extinction by our ancestors, just like the dodo was hunted to extinction. Of course, natural species replacement and survival of the fittest are normal occurrences. But why were the sapiens able to win over other ancient human species? You should know that our ancestors were not as strong, mobile, or agile as other human species. Harari tells you that the most fundamental answer is that our ancestors possessed a more developed ability, which is language ability. He introduces a very vivid and interesting theory, the gossip theory. What does it mean? Biologists believe that the sapien species can produce a lot of sounds, which can be combined into many sentences and develop complex meanings. But this ability is not uncommon among other animals. For example, monkeys also have different calls that can express special meanings like, "There is a lion by the river. Don't go drink water." These calls can also convey information. So, how are sapiens different from them? They are different because sapiens can express concepts about themselves, which means they can gossip about their kind. This ability is incredible. If people in a tribe can gossip about the members of their tribe for hours every day, they can clearly know who in their tribe is reliable and trustworthy. Over time, they can cooperate more closely, and the tribe can grow rapidly. This gossip theory sounds peculiar, but it has been proven by many studies and experiments. Harari believes that it is the key to understanding the progress and development of human civilization. Because if you think about it carefully, information like, "There is a lion by the river" describes a real object. But who is good or bad in a tribe, who is trustworthy, and who has moral problems describe virtual objects like good, bad, trust, and morality. If a species can talk about virtual objects, it can have division of labor and cooperation, and form a complex society. To illustrate this point, Harari further cites a classic sociological research finding, the Dunbar number, also known as the rule of 150. According to this rule, if a group relies only on gossip between individuals to maintain order, the maximum size of the group is 150 people. As long as it is within this range, you don't need any institutional norms. You can maintain normal operations through interpersonal relationships alone, such as in a small company or a small village. But if an organization wants to exceed this threshold of 150 people, it needs a prerequisite. Everyone can imagine and believe in a fictional story. For example, in the Catholic Church, everyone believes in the Passion of Jesus, so believers who don't know each other have a common topic. The same applies to a company, a society, or a country. The foundation of this ability is the ability to describe virtual objects, which I have just introduced to you. This is the first crucial revolution that Harari talks about, the cognitive revolution. The so-called cognitive revolution means that the sapiens species has a developed language ability that surpasses the "there is a lion by the river" level of expression typical of other animals. They can gossip about themselves, and through the ability to gossip about themselves, sapiens developed the ability to describe virtual objects. With the ability to describe virtual objects, our ancestors could believe in one thing together, which allowed them to cross the 150-person threshold, form complex societies, and develop highly advanced civilizations. Harari points out that this is even a huge breakthrough from the perspective of biological evolution. In the past, the evolution of species ultimately depended on genetic mutations, such as monkeys becoming orangutans and orangutans becoming humans. What is the problem with this evolutionary method? Takes too long. How long did it take for apes to evolve into humans? 2 million years, during which the lifestyle of early humans did not change fundamentally. But sapiens have only been around for 70,000 years, and human lifestyles have changed dramatically, ultimately because this species no longer relies on genetic mutations to advance, but on division of labor and cooperation. You might be surprised by this conclusion, as Darwin's theory of evolution and survival of the fittest is too well known, and the discovery of genes was one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs of the 20th century. Now you tell me that biological evolution doesn't rely on genes, but on division of labor and cooperation? Is there evidence for this? Part 2. The Agricultural Revolution. Harari says there is indeed evidence, which is the second revolution he is going to talk about, the Agricultural Revolution. Let me explain it in detail. Before humans entered the agricultural age, during the so-called hunter-gatherer age, you can imagine that in this age, men hunted and women gathered fruits. Even slash-and-burn farming didn't exist, and productivity was extremely low. So you might think that people of this age must have lived miserably, often going hungry, and were not as intelligent as humans who later entered the agricultural society, right? But Harari tells you that your assumption is incorrect. Archaeologists have proven that the nutritional status of ordinary people living in the hunter-gatherer age was much better than that of ordinary people who just entered the agricultural society. They even had larger brain capacities. In other words, from the perspective of evolution, humans actually experienced species degradation from the hunter-gatherer age to the agricultural society. Why did this happen? Let me first explain why people of the hunter-gatherer age had more developed bodies and brains than people of the early agricultural society. Their health status was better because they ate a wide variety of foods in the hunter-gatherer age, and their diet was very balanced. They could have mushrooms in the morning, fruits for lunch, and catch a rabbit for dinner. In contrast, the diet of early agricultural society was relatively monotonous. For example, ancient farmers mostly ate dry food 3 times a day and couldn't encounter pests, natural disasters, or exorbitant taxes. Otherwise, they would be malnourished. Scientists have also proven that people in the hunter-gatherer age had larger brains than people in agricultural societies, because hunter-gatherers had to face a complex natural environment. They had to be familiar with plants and animals, know what could be eaten and what couldn't. They had to be sensitive to their surroundings. If they heard rustling in the grass, it might be a snake, and stepping on it could kill them. They had to be good at exercising, climbing trees to get bird nests, and catching fish in the river. All of this required their brains to process complex information. In contrast, many people in the agricultural society lived in a small place all their lives, cultivated a small wheat field, and lived a simple and boring life with a narrow range of activities, even dying of old age without ever traveling a few miles. Their brains processed less and less information. So if people actually degenerated from the hunter-gatherer age to the agricultural society, why did humans evolve in this direction? The answer is that the agricultural society greatly increased the chances of sapiens reproducing. In the hunter-gatherer age, people had to migrate wherever there was game. But migrating made children a big hassle. But once they entered the agricultural society, humans became sedentary and could have children every year, and the population growth rate soared. Although infant mortality was high in the agricultural society, people were malnourished, and their brain capacity shrank, the total population did increase. This involves a fundamental question of values. In biological terms, the standard for evaluating evolution is not how strong or fast individuals are but how much the species genes spread. Harari makes a comparison. It's like today when evaluating whether a company is good or not, the main factor is how much money it makes, not whether its employees are happy. In the agricultural society, everyone's physical fitness declined, but the efficiency of the population's gene propagation greatly improved, and this is the true meaning of evolution. So Harari says that the agricultural revolution appears to be progress, but for individuals it is actually a huge trap. The agricultural revolution seems like humans successfully domesticated some crops and livestock, but from another perspective, it can be said that these crops and livestock domesticated humans, forcing them to serve their growth every day, plowing, loosening the soil, watering, and fertilizing. Moreover, the development of agriculture led to the creation of society, states, classes, and religions, which brought class oppression and religious wars. Humans did indeed make rapid progress through the division of labor and cooperation, but the suffering of each individual increased. Don't believe it? Look at ancient civilizations. Egypt had the pyramids, Rome had the Colosseum, and China had the Great Wall. Weren't these magnificent wonders of the world built on the oppression and enslavement of ordinary people by pharaohs and emperors? Simply put, the agricultural revolution brought about the creation of civilization through the miserable plight of most people, allowing a small group of people to become the supreme ruling class and enslave most people. This involves the second leap in human imagination brought about by the agricultural revolution, as explained by Harari. The first leap, which we mentioned earlier, is the so-called cognitive revolution, where humans, through gossiping, developed the ability to imagine virtual objects and thus could exceed the 150-person threshold of the tribal group. So what does the second leap refer to? It means that humans can use their imagination to construct a virtual political order. For example, the reason why the ancient Egyptians obeyed the pharaoh's orders to build the pyramids was not just because they feared the pharaoh's authority, but because they sincerely believed that the pharaoh was God's spokesperson on earth, and that building the pyramids for the pharaoh was part of obeying the divine order. Harari says that the social order we live in is fundamentally derived from imagination. This theory has three important manifestations. First, the order constructed from imagination is closely connected with the real world, so it's hard to distinguish. For example, if a child lives in a medieval castle, he doesn't have his own room, and his every move is exposed to others, so he particularly values social status and honor. But in modern society, children have their own rooms, so they develop a sense of individualism, and feel that they don't need to care about others' opinions, and just need to live out their values. This value belief is actually closely tied to how people arrange their living environment, and it's hard to say which causes which. Second, the order of imagination shapes people's desires. For example, today many people want to travel abroad and buy big villas. You think doing these things is a reflection of your free personality, but they are actually instilled in you by consumerism. The movies, TV ads, and Facebook you see every day tell you that you should buy these things for your girlfriend. What should you give her in ancient times? Build a big pyramid and she'll be overjoyed. In fact, whether it's giving a trip abroad or a tomb, it's quite ridiculous, and these things are all instilled in you by imagination. Third, the order of imagination connects people. For example, why is the US dollar worth anything? Fundamentally, it's because of imagination. But it's precisely because of this imagination that we can establish a transnational economy and international trade rules, allowing global capital, goods, and labor to communicate. Without this, humans might revert to a primitive state in an instant. So in the end, Harari summarizes that, as humans, we cannot escape the order established by imagination. Every time we think we've broken free from the high walls of a prison and are moving toward freedom, we've actually just reached another larger prison, expanding our range of activities slightly. Throughout history, humans have been particularly adept at imagining differences between high and low, such as whites being superior to blacks, men being superior to women, and giving countless justifications. In reality, these justifications have nothing to do with justice, they're just derivatives of imagination. Part 3: The Unification of Humankind. Harari believes that starting around 1000 BCE, three kinds of orders emerged that had the potential to truly make all humans happen to imagine the same thing, enabling people to believe that the global community could be united and governed by the same rules. These three orders are the monetary order, the imperial order, and the religious order. Let's first talk about the monetary order. Why does money have such great power? Harari says it's because the monetary system has two main characteristics. It can exchange everything, and everyone believes in it, and the former ultimately depends on the latter. You may remember the political economy perspective taught in middle school that money is essentially a universal equivalent, but Harari will tell you that this understanding is not fundamental enough. The essence of money is that it is the most universal and effective system of trust ever. The biggest difference between it and religion is that religion only believes in itself, but everyone believes in money. You believe it can be exchanged for material wealth, and so do I. Even if we don't know each other and are unclear about each other's character, based on this trust alone, you pay money, and we can cooperate. The second order is the imperial order, which, simply put, is the order of violence. This is also easy to understand. Everyone understands the logic of money, and everyone understands the logic of swords. However, an empire does not rely solely on violent rule. It also spreads unified laws, scripts, languages, and currencies, even a common culture. Moreover, most empires' elites believe they are working for the welfare of all their subjects. Harari specifically mentions China. Ancient China thought it should spread its culture to all directions and widely propagate Chinese civilization. The so-called mandate of heaven was not to exploit the world but to educate all people. Because of this belief, no matter how China was divided throughout history, it would always be unified in the end. By the 21st century, Harari believes a new concept of a global empire is emerging, which may further break down past national boundaries, incorporate global people under its umbrella, and solve common problems like environmental protection and development. The third order is the religious order, or the order of faith. In fact, faith has been around since ancient times. We've previously mentioned that our Sapiens ancestors could imagine virtual objects, so they naturally used this ability to imagine things that don't exist in the real world, such as ghosts and gods. Thus, polytheism, monotheism, nature worship, ancestor worship, and other types of religions emerged. But Harari wants to point out that many modern societal concepts and values are also essentially faith. For example, early modern European humanism is essentially the worship of human nature, making human nature sacred. Harari says that modern society opposes torture, meaning that it provides so-called humanitarian care to criminals, which cannot be argued as good or bad, but we believe that only by doing so can we maintain human dignity, so we do it. Social humanism is the same. They believe equality is the most important value, so they oppose the privileged wealthy because this represents placing more importance on money than on human nature. Similarly, modern society's advocacy of human rights, freedom, and other values is essentially part of the order of faith. Here you might have another question. According to Harari's explanation, does this mean that all the achievements of human civilization are just imagined? Don't the skyscrapers, smart computers, and satellites we've built have any real basis? Harari's answer is, they cannot be said to have none. This brings us to the last part, the scientific revolution. Part 4: The Scientific Revolution. The so-called science is essentially a system of knowledge. But why can this knowledge system create great productivity and destructive power, ignite atomic bombs, and send humans to the moon? Harari says this is because the scientific knowledge system differs from previous knowledge systems in three main ways. First, it is willing to acknowledge its ignorance. Harari said a classic line: "The scientific revolution is not a revolution of knowledge, but a revolution of ignorance." Don't believe it? Think about it. In the past, whether it was Christianity, Buddhism, or Confucianism, they all assumed that all important things in this world were already included in the Bible, Buddhist scriptures. Issues not written in the classics were considered unimportant. To understand the world, you don't need to do anything else, just thoroughly understand these classics. Modern science, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It first acknowledges that it knows nothing about important issues, so it encourages the clash of opinions and viewpoints. Second, it centers on observation and mathematics. This is also a major difference between modern science and past knowledge systems. Harari gave an example. There is a religion called Manichaeism, which believes that everything in this world is a struggle between good and evil, with evil creating material and good creating spirit. If you think about it, this religion can be said to be all-encompassing and can explain everything. For example, my computer broke. Why did it break? Because evil influenced my computer. I found a kind programmer to help fix my computer, and it means good has triumphed over evil. But did it tell you how to fix the computer? Not at all. So although it can explain everything, it has no meaning. Modern science centers on observation and mathematics. Observation is verification. If you say my computer broke because of evil, can you verify it? No, you can only fall into circular reasoning. But if I say the computer broke because the motherboard burned out, replacing the motherboard will fix it, and this is verifiable knowledge. Of course, modern science can also use mathematical tools to calculate the current at which the motherboard burns out, and establish a general rule and theory about computer damage. Third, it uses existing theories to gain new capabilities. This point is also easy to explain. Innovation in ancient societies was essentially random innovation. In the process of labor, craftsmen occasionally discovered that improving a tool in a certain way would be more efficient, and it would be recorded as a set of experiences passed down orally. But modern science can start from existing theories, summarize patterns, and point us in the direction of innovation, rather than relying on the flash of inspiration of craftsmen. But the scientific revolution has also given people a new way of imagining. Everyone believes that science and technology can continuously progress, and human society can move forward. This belief has become the cornerstone of human society. Why do I say this? In 2016, the US had already accumulated $22.8 trillion in debt, which basically means borrowing money for development. But why do you still believe that the US can repay this debt and won't go bankrupt? The reason is that you believe in the continuous progress of US science and economic power, and as long as it can keep growing, it can continue to play this debt game. This is also the essence of all modern countries and modern finance. However, Harari also points out that the scientific revolution, like all revolutions in history, is itself a product of human imagination, which will also bring great material benefits. But this leap in imagination is not necessarily good for the individual. First, European countries use their technological advantage to expand rapidly, bringing tremendous suffering to the world. A conservative estimate is that from 1885 to 1908, more than 6 million people died under colonial rule in Congo alone. Secondly, rapid technological development has led to a rapid increase in global income inequality, and it has become increasingly difficult for underdeveloped countries to catch up with developed ones. According to estimates today, workers in Africa and Indonesia still earn less food than they did 500 years ago. So global economic growth may also be a huge trap, causing more people to live in hunger and poverty. Sapiens. A Brief History of Humankind, takes a perspective of species research to look at world history and outline the essence of human progress and development. Simply put, this species is one that lives in both imagination and reality. This ability to live in dual realities has led us to achieve great accomplishments, while also plunging most individuals into more miserable conditions, from ancient peasants oppressed by divine and royal power to modern workers exploited by capitalism and consumerism. Every revolution and leap hasn't fundamentally changed this model, but pushed its pros and cons to more extremes. The more developed human imagination is, the more profound the suffering faced by each individual. I must tell you that Harari did not draw this conclusion to scare people or seek fame. He has no interest in using anxiety-inducing tactics to gain your approval. His goal is to look forward to the future of all humanity. Why do I say this? Because today's technological progress has reached a point where humans can go beyond biological boundaries, use technology to transform themselves, and complete the next step in evolution. In other words, species evolution has gone from genetic evolution to division of labor evolution, and it may continue to progress from division of labor to technological evolution. From a traditional point of view, this doesn't seem like a bad thing, but now that you understand Sapiens, you'll know that this conceals deeper crises and changes. To repeat, Harari's view is that behind every revolution and leap lies the immense suffering endured by individuals, and this time won't be an exception. Harari extended his conclusions from this book. If a small group of humans can really use technology to transform their bodies and minds, becoming immortal or having a computer-like memory, then class inequality will widen into inequality between species, and most people may suffer more deeply than during any historical period of change. As Sapiens ends, now the only thing we can do is influence the direction they take. Since we may soon be able to transform our desires, perhaps the real question to ask is not what do we want to become, but what do we want to want? If we still disregard this question, then we really haven't thought it through. Alright, that concludes this book's interpretation. You can click on the description below the video to get the link to the full book, and you can also click on the share button to share it with your friends. Congratulations, you've finished another book.